Hey guys, so this is going to be the third video for chapter 14, which is all about reversal designs, which is that ABAB design, and then of course some variations of that. So this is learning objectives 5, 6, and 7 for your chapter. That means we're going to talk about the structure of these ABAB reversal designs and how results can demonstrate cause and effect relationships. We're going to identify the strengths and weaknesses of the ABAB reversal design and circumstances where they should not be used. And then the circumstances where the ABAB reversal design should be modified to create more complex phase changes and phase change designs, and identify options for those modifications. So remember, these letters are referring to the different phases, right? The A is referring to a baseline, no treatment phase, and then B is the introduction of a treatment. That's the treatment phase. Remember, if you do a different treatment, it would be a C, or the next treatment would be a D or whatever. If you make a small modification to that treatment, then it would be B sub 1, and all that. And so really, if you think about it, in order to if you have like lots of treatment options available and whatever, the number of combinations of all of this is potentially unlimited. For example, you could have instead of ABAB, you could have ABB sub 1 AC. So you could have a baseline phase and then treatment B, and then you got to tweak treatment B a little bit, so you have B sub 1, and then you go back to the withdrawal with the baseline phase A, and you remove that treatment altogether, and then you introduce treatment C to see what that does. And it could go on and on, right? So the basic form of this reversal design is just the ABAB, right? 4 phases: baseline phase, treatment, return to baseline A, finally repetition of the treatment phase B. Again, that's that replication component to make sure that if you saw a change between A and B the first time, that you will see that same change the second time. The goal, of course, is to demonstrate the treatment is causing the change in the participant's behavior. Well, how do we do that? Well, we have to see that the pattern of behavior is clearly different in each phase. So the baseline phase to the treatment phase, there should be a clearly different pattern of behavior there. When you go back to the baseline, again, it should change back again in a clear patterned way. And then when you go back to B again, to the treatment phase again, you should see that same pattern, right? And that's what the second point is also talking about, the changes in behavior from baseline to treatment and from treatment to baseline. You want those to be the same, right? Obviously, if there was a change the first time but not the second time, that's a problem. That means that there's some extraneous variables going on, or that your treatment's not actually having the effect that you think it is, things like that. Essentially, what you're trying to do when you're demonstrating this cause and effect behavior, what this is getting at is that you want to show that the researcher can sort of turn off, I'm using air quotes, you can't see it, turn off and turn on the behavior by starting or stopping this treatment or this manipulation of this variable, right? And so here are 2 examples of optimal results, it says, for this ABAB reversal design. Remember the first one, the top graph A, or by the way, this is figure 14.8 from your chapter. The top graph A is from that example at the very beginning of chapter 14, where we talked about the disruptive behavior of the student, and they were introducing that tootling program in the class, where they were reporting positive behavior to each other and for each other instead of tattling, and seeing how that improved that student's disruptive behavior. And so you can see here, this is an example of a stable level change results. So you have a stable baseline level, and then you have a clear change when you introduce the tootling. It went way down, and it's a stable level. And then you go back to they removed the tutoring program, and it went almost back to baseline. And again, it's a stable level. And then when we introduce the tutoring program again, it's a dramatic shift down again, and it's a it's a fairly stable level as well. And remember, stable level means, it's fairly close to a horizontal line. Now, the bottom graph, B, is giving you an example of a trend. Instead of level, it's a stable trend initially in that baseline behavior. So whatever this behavior is, obviously this is a different example, it is heading down anyway, right? But whenever the treatment B is introduced, it stabilizes. It goes into a stable level instead of a downward trend. So maybe these are, scores on a depression inventory or something like that, and so they're getting more and more depressed in the baseline, right? But then they introduce some sort of treatment, and they not only do they not only does their scores increase dramatically, it's up at the top there, but it's also, so they're, less depressed, but it's also leveling off. So it is a very quick effect there. You notice in the withdrawal phase where they remove and go back to baseline, remove that treatment, it does go back to baseline. It's not quite as much of a downward trend as the first time, but it is a stable trend. It's not all over the place. It is a downward trend again, like the baseline. And then when we introduce phase B again, the treatment again, it goes back up, and it levels off into that stable level. And so both of those are great examples of clear cause and effect relationships, because those patterns are so clear. Now, as far as limitations go, the main issues are with that withdrawal phase, that time when we return back to baseline. There's three main issues from that. One is that that withdrawal phase may not result in a change in behavior because the patient is already cured. So when you introduce the treatment the first time, that essentially solved their issues. And so when you remove that treatment and go to back to that A phase, nothing happens. There's no change in behavior because it's already taken effect, it's already worked, and they don't return back to that behavior. So the moral of the story here for that particular issue is that the ABAB reversal design is not appropriate for evaluating treatments that are expected to have permanent effects or long-lasting effects only from one treatment. Because if that happens, then again, you can't show that replication, you can't show that reversal evidence, because there is going to be no reversal, which is a good thing. But this design is not appropriate for evaluating that, obviously. The second issue is that it may result in a slight change, but not a complete return to baseline. So, kind of like we looked at that graph before, if on this top graph where in the withdrawal phase, they returned to baseline somewhat, but it didn't go quite as high, and it wasn't quite as varied as the baseline, so it wasn't exactly like the baseline. But what if that withdrawal line was a lot lower and a lot closer to the tootling lines? So if it's not quite a return to baseline, that can potentially be an issue, because it's saying, is there other variables influencing this besides the treatment? As long as you can replicate it, though, even if you have to do A, B, A, B, A, B, if eventually it can be replicated where it switches back to when you introduce B again, it improves again, or you get that same result again when you introduce B again. It's not quite as big of a deal, and that's one of the reasons the replication part is so important. The third issue is that it may cause an ethical problem if the treatment is working for a participant. So if we're talking an actual clinical setting and an actual treatment, and it's working for the participant, how ethical is it to remove that treatment that could potentially cause them to experience those negative mental health symptoms again? And so one of the things is that's one of the reasons informed consent is so important in research, but also reassuring them that this is just a temporary removal of the therapy, just to make sure that it is addressing all of their symptoms and that they will be receiving the treatment again after that they're not going to be left without the treatment. But also another tool is another thing to keep in mind, I guess I should say, is that the treatment renewal is inevitable, right? When they're released from care finally, or when they no longer need therapy and they go back to their normal lives, they're not going to be receiving that treatment anymore. And so we do need to know for sure that they can actually, like, eventually we don't want them to return to that baseline, right? We want them to stay in that treatment phase in their terms of their behavior. And so this can sort of also be considered a trial period to assess the permanence of that treatment. Does the behavior stay improved when we remove the treatment? So just some things to keep in mind there. Of course, there's going to be variations, as we mentioned, for the ABAB design. It's not just always ABAB. Sometimes the researchers need to add treatment or modify the sequence of the phases, especially, like, for example, if B is not effective or is not as effective as they thought, they may tweak it and introduce a B sub 1, or they may introduce a new phase, a new treatment, C or D or whatever. So this creates a more complex design. Researchers must incorporate new treatments into the phase sequence to prove that causal relationship. So part of that is, as you can see here, these examples here, A, B, B, B wasn't working, so they switched to C, but then they went back to the baseline A and then did C again just to make sure that C had an effect. That's that reversal part. Here, they did A, B, C, B, C. So they did B, C, and they noticed that there was a change, obviously, after C embedding. And so they did B, C again to see if they observed that difference again. I would have liked to have had them return to baseline and then do BC again too to see. But again, it depends on what they found. We don't know exactly what caused that. But to just, obviously you can tell that there's unlimited letter combinations, but only some of those combinations are truly experimental, because you have to show that clear change between phases, and you have to show that when the treatment is introduced, that change is happening, and then it has to be replicated. That has to be replicated at least once. So that's why you end up adding those, more phases and those more letters. The example in your book is this study by Mateer, Romani, Greer, and Fisher in 2015 about the young girl who had pica, which means she was eating things that are not edible, and she was destroying holiday decorations. And so you see, if you read that example, they had the baseline of the destructive behavior, then they instituted the DRA therapy, and the behavior went down, but not enough. It was still, bad. And so they did the facial screen where they covered her eyes for a little bit, and that kind of helped her reset her brain. It helped remove that temptation and helped her with her behavior. As you can see, it went way down in treatment C. So then they went back to B, just the DRA therapy to see what would happen. And of course, the behavior went back up. And so they then introduce the screen again to see, hey, can we get this behavior to go back down when we introduce the screen? And so from this clear pattern, you can see that the combination of the DRA and the facial screen is what did it, is what was causing the most reduction in that behavior. Okay, so our learning check really quickly. What name is given to a single case design consisting of the following 4 phases in the order given? Baseline treatment, baseline treatment. Obviously, that's what we've talked about. That's the title of the chapter. It's ABAB. The BABA wouldn't make any sense because you have to have the baseline established beforehand. And ABA would just be baseline treatment, baseline, and there wouldn't be the chance for replication for the second treatment. Which of the following is an ethical concern for the ABAB design? And if you read through all of those, none of those actually really make sense from an ethical standpoint. The other 3 they don't make sense. They wouldn't violate any sort of ethics, and they wouldn't really make sense. So obviously the answer is removing the treatment when it's already effective. So it's working for them, it's helping them, and then you take it away. That is an ethical concern. Which of the following would cause a researcher who planned to use an ABAB design to switch to a more complex phase change design? If the participant is showing unstable behavior in the initial baseline, that just means you need to extend the number of observations in the baseline. So that's not what that is. If the participant is showing no change in behavior when the treatment is introduced, then you may need to tweak that treatment or introduce a different treatment. So that's not the answer. And so the third answer, the participant returns to the baseline behavior when the treatment is, oh wait, I just said that backwards, y'all. I'm losing my mind. Let me go to the third one. The participant returns to the baseline behavior when the treatment is removed. Of course, if they return to the baseline behavior when the treatment is removed, that's what we want. So that's not it. It's actually the second answer, y'all. It's Thanksgiving and I'm cooking a turkey and I'm losing my mind. The participant shows no change in behavior when the treatment is introduced. If the treatment's not working, then obviously that's the answer. We need to introduce, as I said, a different therapy or modify it in some way. And so that is the more complex design. And so that is the answer. Whew, y'all. All right. The last slide here is just a reflection activity. You guys can pause this, you can screenshot it. And it's just to get you thinking about if the treatment involved a series of phases and the patient showing improvement, then what do you do? And this is to get you to think about the ethical concerns and all of that. Would you remove the treatment or to see if we can get that replication or not? Or would you tweak things? How would you do that? Just to kind of get you thinking through the things that researchers think about when they're doing these single case designs and these reversal designs. So that's it for 14.3. And I'm here if you need me.